It was a quiet afternoon at a roadside cafe just off the highway. The kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee, families shared late lunches, and old rock songs hung softly through dusty speakers. Sunlight spilled across wooden tables. Engines cooled in the parking lot. Nothing felt unusual. At a corner table near the window, an older man sat alone. Simple jacket, calm posture, slow movements. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He stirred his coffee once, then set the spoon down carefully, like a man who had nowhere urgent to be. A waitress passed by and smiled politely. He nodded back. Outside, the distant rumble of motorcycles began to grow louder. At first, no one paid attention. The highway was always busy. But this sound was different. It wasn't just one engine. It was several, heavy, coordinated, approaching. The vibrations reached the cafe windows before the bikes even turned into the lot. A few customers glanced outside. Black motorcycles rolled in one by one, parking in a line near the entrance. Leather jackets, heavy boots, loud laughter. Inside, the older man didn't turn his head. He didn't react. But his eyes shifted slightly toward the reflection in the glass. He had noticed them. One of the bikers removed his helmet and looked toward the cafe window. He squinted, paused, then nudged the man beside him. "Hey, isn't that?" The sentence didn't finish. But the mood outside changed. Smiles faded. Postures stiffened. Because someone had just recognized the man sitting alone. And in less than a minute, this peaceful afternoon was about to become something else entirely. The cafe door opened with a sharp metallic chime. Conversations didn't stop immediately, but they lowered. Heavy boots stepped across the wooden floor. 1, 2, 3. 4 bikers walked in together, filling the doorway with leather, denim, and attitude. The smell of gasoline and hot engines followed them inside. The waitress forced a polite smile. "Table for 4. One of them didn't answer her. He was staring past her, straight at the corner table. At the older man.
"Yeah."
The tallest one muttered, not breaking eye contact. "We'll sit over there." They chose the table directly behind him, too close. Chairs scraped loudly across the floor, intentionally loud, a performance. The older man didn't turn around. He lifted his coffee and took a slow sip. One of the bikers leaned back in his chair, boots stretched out. "You know who that looks like?" he said under his breath. Another chuckled. "No way. That guy's like, what, 60? Something now." A pause. Then the tallest one stood up. He didn't walk around the table. He walked straight into the older man's shoulder. Not a gentle bump. A deliberate hit. Coffee sloshed inside the cup, nearly spilling over the edge. The cafe went quiet. The biker stepped back slowly. "Oh, didn't see you there, old man." The tone wasn't apologetic. It was bait. The older man placed his cup back on the saucer with precision. Then he looked up. Calm eyes, no rush, no anger. "My mistake," he said evenly. "Didn't realize I was in your way." That response caught them slightly off guard. They expected irritation, they wanted reaction. Instead, they got control. The biker smirked. "Nah," he said louder now, making sure others could hear. "You look like you've been in people's way your whole life." A few uncomfortable glances moved around the room. Phones began subtly lifting. The older man remained seated, still unbothered, and that stillness started to feel heavy. The second biker leaned forward. "You look familiar. You used to be in movies or something." No answer.
"Yeah."
The first one laughed. "Weren't you that tough guy, throwing people around?" He lightly tapped the older man's shoulder with 2 fingers, mocking. "So what happened?" The older man slowly turned in his chair now, facing them fully, not defensive, not aggressive, just present. "I'm having coffee," he said. "That's all that's happening." The simplicity of the answer made one of the bikers snort. "You hear that? He's just having coffee." The tallest one stepped closer again, this time invading personal space. "You don't get special treatment here," he said. "This isn't a movie set." Silence. The older man looked at him steadily. "I never asked for any." That line landed.
Not dramatic, not loud, just steady.
The tension shifted slightly, because now it didn't look like a group teasing a weak stranger. It looked like a group trying very hard to provoke someone who wouldn't break. And that's frustrating. The biker's jaw tightened. He wasn't getting the reaction he wanted, so he tried something smaller, petty. He reached down and nudged the table with his knee. The coffee trembled. "Careful," the older man said softly. The biker leaned in. "Or what?" A long pause. The older man didn't answer. He simply held eye contact. That silence felt longer than it was. In the background, the other bikers shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered, "Let it go." But ego doesn't let go easily in front of an audience. And now there was definitely an audience. The tallest biker raised his voice slightly. You think you're still dangerous or something? The older man gave a faint, almost tired smile. Danger doesn't need to announce itself. That sentence changed the air, not because it was threatening, but because it wasn't. It sounded like experience. The biker laughed louder than necessary. Listen to this guy. He thinks he's some kind of legend. Another biker stood up now, circling slowly. The waitress hovered near the counter, unsure whether to intervene. The older man finally pushed his chair back slightly, not to stand, just to create space. I don't want trouble, he said calmly. Sit down. Enjoy your afternoon. That should have ended it. But humiliation in front of friends is gasoline, and gasoline was already in the room. The tallest biker's face hardened. You don't get to dismiss me. He placed a hand on the table and leaned forward aggressively. You don't talk down to me. The older man's expression didn't change. I'm not. The biker's friends exchanged looks. This wasn't going the way they imagined. They wanted dominance. Instead, they were getting measured restraint, and restraint makes insecure men feel smaller. Outside, more engines rumbled faintly. Another bike pulling into the lot. Inside, the biker straightened his posture. He needed to reclaim control. So he did the one thing left that would guarantee escalation. He stepped closer. Close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and then he shoved him. Not hard enough to knock him down, just enough to make a statement. The chair slid slightly across the floor. Gasps rose from nearby tables. The older man didn't fall. He didn't stumble. He simply absorbed the movement and stood up slowly. Not rushed, not dramatic, just deliberate. Now they were face to face, and for the first time, the biker realized something subtle. The older man wasn't tense. He wasn't bracing. He wasn't scared. He was balanced and completely ready. The room held its breath, because the line had just been crossed, and no one knew what would happen next. For a moment, no one moved. The older man stood there, steady, grounded, his chair slightly angled behind him, his coffee cup still trembling on the table from the shove. The tallest biker smirked. Look at that, he said loudly to his friends. Hay can still stand. A few nervous laughs echoed. But they weren't confident laughs anymore. They were testing laughs. The older man adjusted his jacket calmly. You've made your point, he said. Sit down. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Just final. That tone irritated the biker more than any insult could have. You don't give me instructions. He stepped closer again, invading space deliberately. The other bikers stood now too, forming a loose semicircle. Not attacking, but surrounding. Classic intimidation. A young guy at a nearby table started recording openly now. The waitress whispered to someone behind the counter, "Should we call the police?" No one answered. The tension was thick, but strangely quiet. The older man scanned them briefly, not nervously, assessing, calculating distance, posture, weight distribution. Experience was visible, not flashy, just subtle. One of the bikers reached forward and flicked the older man's collar. Still think you're tough? Silence. Another one leaned in from the side. I saw your movies, he sneered. All slow motion. Fake hits. The tallest biker chuckled. Yeah, let's see how it works in real life. The older man exhaled slowly through his nose. You don't want this, he said. That line could have sounded cliché. But the way he said it wasn't dramatic. It sounded like advice. That only made it worse. The tallest biker's jaw tightened. You keep talking like you're above this. I'm not above it. The older man replied calmly. I'm trying to stay below it. That confused them. What does that even mean? One biker muttered. It means, he said, you still have a choice. Now frustration turned into anger. Because he wasn't rising to their level. And when someone refuses to fight emotionally, it makes aggressive men feel exposed. The tallest biker shoved him again, harder this time. The chair behind the older man tipped and fell to the ground with a loud crack. Gasps filled the cafe. A glass shattered somewhere in the background. Phones were fully raised now. This wasn't teasing anymore. This was about to explode. The older man glanced briefly at the fallen chair, then back at the biker. His voice lowered slightly. Last warning. No yelling, no theatrics, just clarity. The biker laughed loudly, too loudly. You think you scare me? He stepped forward again, raising his hand slightly as if daring him to react. But the older man didn't raise his fists. He didn't shift into some exaggerated stance. He just adjusted his footing subtly. Small step, balanced, ready. One of the bikers behind him whispered, Bro, chill. But ego was now fully in control. The tallest biker suddenly slapped the coffee cup off the table. It smashed against the floor. The sharp sound echoed through the cafe. Complete silence followed. The biker leaned forward, inches from the older man's face. What a long pause. The older man's eyes didn't blink. You're embarrassing yourself. That was it. That was the sentence. Not a threat. Not a challenge. A statement. And in front of his crew, that was worse than a punch. The biker's face flushed red. His pride had been pierced. He grabbed the older man by the front of his jacket. Hard gasps erupted. Chairs scraped as customers instinctively leaned back. For the first time, physical control was obvious. The biker tightened his grip. You think I won't? Still no panic in the older man's expression. Just focus. Measured breathing. Then something subtle happened. He didn't strike. He didn't swing. He gently placed one hand over the biker's wrist. Not aggressive, almost casual but firm. The biker tried to tighten his grip and realized he couldn't. The pressure on his wrist shifted suddenly, slightly twisted. Not dramatic. Precise, his smirk faded. The grip loosened involuntarily. Confusion flashed across his face. The older man leaned in slightly, close enough that only he could hear. I don't want to hurt you. The biker attempted to pull his hand back. It didn't move the way he expected. There was a quiet control in the hold, subtle but undeniable. No big motion. No showmanship. Just leverage. The biker's expression changed. Not fear, not yet, but realization. His friends noticed. Yo, what's going on? The older man released his wrist gently, stepped back, giving him space, not offering exit. The biker stumbled half a step back, masking it with a laugh. Lucky move, he muttered, but his voice wasn't as steady now. Outside, engines rumbled again, louder this time, multiple. The sound vibrated through the windows. One of the bikers glanced toward the door. More guys are here. The tallest biker straightened his posture again, trying to reclaim dominance. Good, he said loudly. Now it'll be fair. But the older man didn't look concerned. In fact, he looked almost patient, like he knew something they didn't. The cafe door's shadow shifted as sunlight was blocked momentarily. Someone had just stepped up outside. The engine noise cut off. Silence returned, heavy, expectant. The bikers glanced toward the entrance. The older man remained still, composed, balanced, waiting. Because whatever was about to happen next wasn't random, and deep down, the cafe door opened slowly, not violently, not dramatically, just a quiet push. Every head turned. A single man stepped inside, tall, broad shoulders, heavy boots. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He simply walked in with the kind of presence that doesn't need noise. A leather cut rested over his shoulders, a patch stitched across the back. Hell's Angels. The temperature in the room shifted instantly. The younger bikers froze. One of them muttered under his breath, "You've got to be kidding me." The tall biker who had been leading everything stiffened. But he didn't step back. Not yet. The Hell's Angel removed his gloves slowly, one finger at a time. His eyes scanned the room once, took in the fallen chair, the shattered coffee cup, the tight semicircle around the older man. Then his gaze landed on him. Recognition. Not surprise, recognition. The older man gave the smallest nod, no smile, no greeting, just acknowledgement. The leader of the younger bikers forced a laugh. Everything's cool, he said quickly. Just having a conversation. The Hell's Angel didn't look at him. Not yet. He took 2 more steps forward. Boots heavy against the wooden floor. Each step echoing louder than it should have. The cafe was completely silent now. Even the music had stopped. The biker leader shifted his weight. Trying to hold ground. Trying not to look small in front of his crew. We didn't know it was. You didn't know. The Hell's Angel interrupted calmly. That voice was different. Deep, controlled. Not angry, but final. Now he turned toward the younger bikers. And suddenly, the dynamic flipped. They weren't predators anymore. They were being assessed. Is this how you represent yourselves? He asked quietly. No one answered. The leader swallowed. It wasn't like that. The Hell's Angel glanced at the older man again. You all right? The older man nodded once. I gave them options. That line carried weight, because it meant this hadn't escalated by accident. It had been allowed to reach this point. The leader tried one last time to save face. We were just messing around. The Hell's Angel stepped closer to him now. Not aggressive. Just close enough that the difference in authority became obvious. You put hands on him. Silence. The younger bikers looked at their leader. Waiting. He hesitated. That hesitation said everything. The Hell's Angel's jaw tightened slightly. You ever think, he said quietly, that maybe you don't test every man you see? No yelling. No threats. Just disappointment. And somehow that felt worse. The leader's shoulders lowered slightly. He glanced at the older man. For the first time, there was no mockery in his eyes. Only awareness. The Hell's Angel stepped back. "This isn't how you earn respect," he said. Then, to the older man, "Sorry about the disturbance." Simple, direct. The older man adjusted his jacket again. "It's handled. No ego, no victory speech." The leader bent down slowly and picked up the fallen chair. Set it upright. One of his crew grabbed napkins from a nearby table and began wiping up the spilled coffee without being told. No one ordered them to. They just did it, because the atmosphere had changed completely. The Hell's Angel turned toward the door, paused, then looked back at the younger bikers. "You ride," he said, "but you haven't learned yet." That sentence landed deeper than any punch. The younger bikers walked out first. Not loudly this time. No revving engines. No laughter. Just boots against pavement. The leader was last. He stopped briefly near the older man. Their eyes met. There was a silent exchange there. Not forgiveness. Not friendship. Understanding. Then he left. The door closed. The engine started outside. But they didn't roar. They pulled away smoothly, controlled. Inside the cafe, people slowly exhaled. Phones lowered. Whispers began. The Hell's Angel remained for a second longer. "You attract storms," he said quietly. The older man gave the faintest smile. "Only when they're looking for one." A small nod was exchanged. Then the Hell's Angel walked out. The door shut behind him. Silence lingered. The older man picked up his cup. The waitress approached carefully. "Sir, your coffee is on the house." He shook his head gently. "I'll pay for it. Because strength doesn't demand free things. It restores balance." And in less than 10 minutes, an entire cafe had witnessed something rare. Not violence, not chaos, but hierarchy. And a lesson that spreads faster than fear. Outside, the last motorcycle disappeared down the highway, and inside, peace returned. But it felt different now. Earned. For several seconds after the motorcycles disappeared down the highway, no one inside the cafe spoke. It was as if the air needed time to settle. The older man remained standing beside the table. Not shaking, not angry, just present. The waitress finished wiping the floor, hands still slightly trembling. "Sir, are you sure you're all right?" He gave her a calm nod. "I'm fine." But his eyes briefly shifted toward the window again, not to check if they were coming back, to confirm something else. Outside, the highway stretched empty now, quiet. The Hell's Angel hadn't lingered. He had stepped in, corrected the imbalance, and left. No drama, no speeches. Just order restored. The young man who had been recording finally approached cautiously. "Sir, was that really about respect?" The older man looked at him carefully. "What do you think?" The young man hesitated. "I think they thought you were an easy target." A faint smile. "Most people judge by appearance," he replied. "It saves them time, but it can cost them." That line hung in the air. The cafe owner stepped out from behind the counter. "You handled that differently than most would." The older man pulled his wallet from his pocket and placed cash on the table. "There was nothing to handle." The owner frowned slightly. "They pushed you. They pushed themselves further than they should have." Calm, controlled, detached. The difference between ego and discipline. He bent down and picked up a small ceramic fragment that had been missed. Placed it gently on the table. "Details matter." Outside, one customer peeked through the blinds. "They're gone for good," she said softly. The older man didn't respond immediately. Then he said something unexpected. "They'll think about today." Not as a threat, as a certainty. The young man with the phone asked, "Do you think they'll come back?" A long pause. "If they do," he said quietly, "it won't be for the same reason." Confusion crossed the young man's face. "What do you mean?" The older man met his eyes. "They came looking for validation." He adjusted his jacket. "They left with perspective." That wasn't a boast. It was observation. The waitress placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. He hadn't asked for it. She slid it forward gently. "On the house," she insisted. This time he didn't argue. He simply nodded once in appreciation. Outside, a single motorcycle engine echoed faintly in the distance, but it didn't turn into the lot. Just passing traffic. The tension was gone. But something else remained. Respect. The young man lowered his phone slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "You already did." He swallowed. "Why didn't you hit him when you had the chance?" The older man leaned back slightly in his chair. "Because hitting someone is easy." He lifted the cup, restrained his harder. Silence again. The kind of silence that makes people think. The cafe owner crossed his arms thoughtfully. Most people would have wanted revenge. The older man shook his head. Revenge keeps the fight alive. He took a slow sip. Control ends it. The young man processed that. "So you weren't afraid?" The older man set the cup down carefully. "Fear isn't the problem," he said. That line settled deeply in the room. Outside, a car passed. Inside, normal life slowly resumed. Chairs were repositioned. Conversations restarted, quieter, more thoughtful now. But something had shifted permanently. The story would spread. Not as gossip, as a lesson. The young bikers would replay the moment in their heads. The wrist control, the eye contact, the arrival of someone they respected more than themselves, the hierarchy they hadn't understood. And that's the part no one in the cafe fully realized. This wasn't random. The Hell's Angel hadn't arrived by coincidence. He had been nearby. He had heard the engines. He had seen the posture outside, and he had stepped in not to fight, but to prevent something worse. The older man glanced toward the highway one last time. There was no tension in his posture, no anticipation of revenge, just awareness, because real power doesn't chase conflict, but it recognizes patterns, and he knew something most people didn't. Moments like this echo, not loudly, but deeply. The young bikers would talk among themselves later. They would justify. They would laugh it off. But when they rode past this cafe again someday, they would remember, not the shove, not the broken cup, the silence, the control, the moment they realized they had misjudged someone completely. The older man stood up slowly, left enough cash to cover everything, including the broken cup. He buttoned his jacket. The young man asked one final question. What should someone do if they're disrespected like that? The older man paused near the door, hand on the handle. He looked back calmly. Decide whether you want to win the moment or win yourself. Then he stepped outside into the sunlight. The door closed softly behind him, and inside that small roadside cafe, everyone understood something without it being explained. Strength isn't proven in noise, it's proven in control, and the most dangerous man in the room is usually the quietest one. Outside, the afternoon sun hadn't changed. Traffic still moved, wind still brushed dust across the edge of the highway. But something invisible had shifted. The older man walked toward his car at an unhurried pace. No rush, no adrenaline dump, just steady breathing. Behind him inside the cafe, whispers had already begun spreading. Did you see that? He didn't even flinch. Those bikers looked terrified at the end. Reputation doesn't explode. It travels, quietly, across tables, across towns, across communities. The younger bikers had stopped at a gas station. No one was laughing now. Helmets rested on handlebars. The leader stood near the air pump, staring at nothing. One of his crew finally broke the silence. You didn't tell us it was him. The leader snapped back defensively. I didn't know for sure. You shoved him. No answer. Another voice added. And then he had your wrist locked without even trying. That one landed. The leader flexed his hand unconsciously. It still felt strange. Not injured. Just controlled. That was the part that unsettled him. There had been no anger in the man's eyes. No rush. Just certainty. And worse. He had given him chances. Multiple chances. The leader exhaled sharply. That Hell's Angel showing up. No one finished that sentence. They all understood what it meant. Hierarchy, lines, respect. They rode bikes. But they weren't in the same league as the man who walked in and shifted the entire room without raising his voice. The owner stepped outside to take a breath. The younger man who had recorded the incident was already replaying the footage. But something surprised him. On camera, it looked even calmer than it felt. No dramatic moves, no flashy strikes, just precision. Upload it, someone suggested. He hesitated, then slowly shook his head. No, why not? It'll go viral. He looked back at the door the older man had walked through. Some things aren't meant for clout. That decision mattered more than he realized, because respect grows differently than attention. Further down the highway, the lone rider from earlier pulled off near a scenic overlook. He removed his helmet and let the wind cool his face. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't impressed. He was thoughtful. He'd seen ego before. He'd seen men escalate small moments into permanent damage. But today, something different happened. Today, discipline had stopped chaos before it turned violent. He respected that. He pulled out his phone, typed a short message. Handled. No details. Then he put the phone away, because in certain circles, that was enough. At the gas station, the younger bikers prepared to leave. The leader stood still a moment longer. One of his crew asked quietly, "So what was that about?" He didn't answer immediately, then finally said, "It wasn't about fighting." They looked at him. It was about control. That word tasted strange coming from him, but it was true. He replayed the moment in his head. The eye contact, the wrist lock, the warning, the choice he had ignored. And then something worse than embarrassment hit him. Clarity. He realized the older man hadn't humiliated him. He had spared him. That understanding stung deeper than a broken jaw would have. He put his helmet on slowly. Engine started again. But they didn't roar this time. They rolled back onto the highway in silence. Miles away, he drove steadily, windows slightly cracked, radio low. He wasn't replaying the confrontation. He wasn't fantasizing about how it could have gone differently. Because for him, it was already finished. Conflict is a chapter, not a lifestyle. He pulled into a small rest area and stepped out for a moment. Stretched his shoulders. Breathing even, he understood something simple. Young men test strength. Real men protect balance. And today, balance had been restored, not by force, but by presence. That evening, in separate places across town, conversations happened. At the gas station, at the cafe, in biker group chats, in quiet reflections before sleep. The story wasn't told as, some guy got beat. It was told as, we picked the wrong man. And that distinction matters, because fear fades, but respect lingers. The younger bikers would remember the risk control, the silence, the arrival of someone higher in the hierarchy. But most of all, they would remember how calm he was. And next time they looked for someone to intimidate, they might hesitate. That hesitation prevents damage, prevents hospital visits, prevents regret. And that is the real consequence. Not bruises, not sirens, not viral fame. Perspective. The highway kept moving. The sun began to lower, and somewhere in that quiet shift from afternoon to evening, a lesson settled in. Strength isn't proven by domination, it's proven by restraint. And sometimes, the biggest victor is walking away, without needing one. Evening settled slowly over the highway. The cafe lights glowed warmer now, traffic thinned, and the place where the confrontation had happened looked completely normal again. Chairs aligned, floor cleaned, music playing softly. If someone walked in at that moment, they'd never know anything had occurred. But the people who were there knew, because certain moments don't leave marks on walls. They leave marks on perspective. The young man who had recorded the incident sat alone at his table long after the older man had left. He kept replaying one specific second. Not the shove, not the wrist control, not even the arrival of the Hell's Angel. It was the pause before violence, the moment where a decision could have gone either way. And he realized something uncomfortable. Most people don't lose control in big dramatic explosions. They lose it in small, ego-driven seconds. One sentence, one shove, one need to prove something. That's where damage begins. Across town, the biker leader parked his motorcycle outside his apartment. He didn't storm inside. He didn't brag to anyone. He just sat there for a minute, engine off, helmet still on. He replayed the moment again. The grip on his wrist. The quiet voice saying, I don't want to hurt you. There had been no insult in it, no superiority. Just fact. And the more he thought about it, the more he understood. He hadn't been facing anger. He had been facing control. And control is harder to fight than aggression. Because aggression feeds on reaction. Control starves it. He removed his helmet slowly. For the first time in a long time, he felt small. Not weak, just inexperienced. That realization doesn't destroy a man. It refines him if he allows it. Back on the road. The older man drove with the same steady rhythm he always had. He wasn't thinking about dominance. He wasn't thinking about victory. He was thinking about something much simpler. Balance. There's a difference between knowing how to hurt someone and needing to. Most people chase validation. They want to prove they're strong. But true strength doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't even need acknowledgement. It just needs discipline. He remembered the young man's question in the cafe. Why didn't you hit him? The answer was still the same. Because violence is easy. Anyone can throw a punch. Very few can walk away when their pride demands action. That's the real test. What happened that afternoon wasn't about motorcycles. It wasn't about age. It wasn't about reputation. It was about hierarchy of character. The young bikers thought power was loud. They thought it meant pushing someone smaller, testing someone older, creating a scene. But they learned something else instead. Power is quiet, it waves, it warns, and only moves when it must. And even then, it stops once balance is restored. The next week, life continued. The cafe filled with customers again. The highway roared with traffic. But the young man who had recorded the video found himself reacting differently to small provocations. When someone bumped into him at the grocery store, he didn't snap. When a coworker spoke sharply, he didn't escalate. Because he had seen something rare. He had seen restraint win without humiliation. And that image stayed with him. That's how lessons spread. Not through fear, through example. Somewhere else, the biker leader rode past that same cafe days later. He didn't stop. He didn't rev his engine. He just glanced at it briefly and kept going. But this time, he rode differently. Less reckless, more aware. Because once you've been shown your limits, you either ignore them or you grow. And that's the part most people misunderstand. Respect isn't about being feared. It isn't about status. It isn't about who arrives with backup. Respect begins with self-control. If you can't control your ego, you'll always look for someone smaller to dominate. But if you control yourself, you don't need to dominate anyone. That afternoon at the cafe ended without sirens, without broken bones, without viral headlines, but it ended with something stronger. Perspective. And sometimes, the most powerful man in the room is the one who chooses not to prove it. If you believe real strength is staying calm under pressure, comment, control,